So let's just pick up the idea of the unconscious. So I sort of spoke about what is one of the main advantages of the unconscious. It's the low energy, high yield. No, it gives us a very high yield. And so things happen very quickly and at speed in the unconscious and so on. So there are some scientists who ask the question, not the question why are we unconscious, but the question is why are we conscious, right? And so, of course, from a faith perspective, we don't know what part of our consciousness constitutes soul. But it's part of the mystery for us. And so part of we don't know everything. But what we do know is that a large part of the consciousness that we call consciousness is very much related to and very dependent on neurons that are firing. Think about an anesthetic, or if you are, and sleep, by the way, is an altered state of consciousness. You are not unconscious when you sleep. You have an altered state of consciousness. So when you wake up, I'm sure those of you who had anesthetics in your lives, right, will know there's a very big difference between anesthetics and sleep. When you wake up, you know that you slept. When you had anesthetics, there was nothing. Yeah? You get the anesthetic, and the next thing you know is you're back in the bed, and you don't know, and pain, exactly. You don't know what happened. All right, so that's that state of, we know that the brain itself and the neurons and the consciousness, we can switch it off with the right kind of anesthetics, and that basically stun the neurons. So it's a very physical process. And so the state of consciousness, and probably even a deeper question, is the question of awareness, self-awareness. The question is, where does that reside, and how does that connect with soul? We don't know. We will one day. We don't know. All right, maybe that's not a day, it's a misnomer, but it's timeless in the eternity. But this is not for me to speak about. I'm going to talk about the science, right? So consciousness, we are conscious so that the unconscious can continuously be informed. Is the unconscious, therefore, or the consciousness, therefore, way less important than the conscious? No. That's not what we're saying. If you've got a 1 in 10,000 consciousness versus unconscious, doesn't mean that the conscious part of your brain is less important. It's critical. It's also very powerful. And so the free will and decision making, I'm not going to go into the Descartes kind of conversation as to whether we have got determinism or non-determinism and so on, but let's for a moment just say we've got free will, and in the conscious we can make decisions, which has an impact on the unconscious. Drive for tomorrow. Okay. What I want to get to is a very important thing, and it's actually going to build towards resilience now. Resilience being the essence, essential ingredient that gives us complex adaptation, that ensure that we survive as a species. All right. But to do that, I'm going to still actually go to, we're still going to get born, right? So now we are born. That was easy. All right. All right. And exactly, sure. I was told I was there. Many times. All right. But now we are born. The way that the brain-body system of a baby, right from birth till death, one way of thinking of it, and to understand how we develop, is to understand it within the context of what are the challenges? What are the threats? What's going to kill you? Because the first thing you need to develop and to be able to mitigate or nullify, are the things that's going to kill you. And we do that right from birth to death. There's also a bit of a macabre way of thinking of it, but I think it's valuable to think of it this way. You and I are incubated right from the start of life till death. Think about it. We are in the uterus when we form. That's incubated. When we are born, we start to cry. Why do you cry so much when you are born? Well, we don't know, right? But one way of at least sort of a plausible thought is, can you imagine that you are out in the open and you are sucked by this humongous magnet to the ground, and you have very little capacity to actually get yourself up against this magnet. That's called motor milestone development. So the motor system developed the capacity for just getting up and then to be able to stand and actually then move, right, on this magnet. And yeah, and then we watch the Olympics and say those who move the fastest, within this confinement, they are the ones we actually give the medals. But we're still confined. And then, of course, as we get older, we go, nah, yeah. It's actually not that, it's actually this. Because otherwise you're going to fall off. All right, but it's a fact. And so this observation of so when you were born, the first thing to be sucked to the magnet, I think that's probably more likely the reason why babies cry. The other one is the doctor's face is so ugly. But that's probably... or whoever caught the baby. All right. Yes, 100%. You are out of the incubator, exactly. So now you're out of the incubator and all of a sudden you're exposed. And what do you need? You need incubation. Oxygen, absolutely. Right, you need oxygen. That's to keep you alive. But you also need something else to keep you alive. And this is not to survive, this is to keep you alive. It's the incubator. It's bonding. It's to entrust yourself, to actually have bonding with, and that's with the mother figure. And that bonding comes through physical touch. Right? Everybody knows what bonding does. Just a few words on that. I'm just going to have to say a few words about that. Bonding is activated by your brain stem, by secretion in the baby and in the mother's brain. The brain stem activates. So it's a very primitive part of your brain that activates the secretion of something called oxytocin. Men also have bonding. Fathers, it's very important because we are here for talking about fatherhood, but fatherhood needs to know a lot about motherhood and so on, of course. We need to understand the system. Men also secrete something called vasopressin, which is also vasopressin. That's another bonding kind of element. Fathers secrete much more vasopressin and oxytocin when they are in the presence of the pregnant wife or spouse or mother, and in the presence of the newborn child. So the closer the father is to the family, the more that changes the brain of the father. Now this is an important thing to understand, because one of the reasons men run away from this is that they are not close enough to it. Sure, I actually have a tone of a preacher now, but they're not close enough to it, yeah? It is. If you are close enough, you will want to stay close enough. And that's one of the principles that I think young men do not understand. Right? So there's something there that I think is of profound importance. The closer we are to that family, the more we entrust ourselves to the family and the family to us. With a mother, it's a little bit different. A mother don't only secrete oxytocin. She also has a string of fibers, those nerve cells, a string of them, a whole circuit. It's called a little band that connects the right and the left side of the brain in the front. She has a physical brain connection that ensures that she sticks to that baby. It's not only the oxytocin. Because if it was for oxytocin only, the mother would, even though she has much more of that bonding, she would have walked away. It's too hard. but she is actually physically bound to that child. And there's a lot written about the separation cry theory. The mother can actually recognize the baby's cry amongst 20 other cries, right, in an hospital. She can recognize the baby. And it's that part of the brain that has connected her physically to the baby that ensures that she looks after the child. Right. So we're back to the physical touch. I'll tell you a very quick story, very quick one. I lived in an apartment in Cape Town, and this was probably about 10 years ago. We just started out with Neuroscience, and I walked in after this busy day, and there comes the knock on the door. And I said, 5 o'clock, this is happy hour, not here for me now. So opened the door, and there was the guard, one of the security guards. He says, "Hey, doctor." And I said, this is not good. There's a woman who's giving birth. You must come help. She's in labor. I said, "Where?" He says, "Next to the lift. Please come." And I say, "I haven't actually delivered a child for 20 years." I said, "For 20 years, this is 20." And I told him, 20 years. And he looks at me and he says, "It still makes you better than me, right?" So I thought, I'd rather not tell him about the legal implications here. So I just thought, good answer, let's go. So we went. And it's very sad, the world we live in. This mother was one of the cleaners, and she had a third child. But she had to work on the day, basically, that the child was born. And she was lying there. Unfortunately, one of the other neighbors brought in some blankets and towels and so on. And I looked at this, and I said, "Please just keep the baby away from the mother." So I told the mother, just hang in. You will. I'll put the child on, I'll give you the child when we're ready, but we first have to get the real medics in here. So we called the paramedics. And the paramedics came, by the way, I just hung on to the umbilical cord, because why? I'll tell you now. So the paramedics came in, they put a little drip on there, put a line in so she had fluids. And I said, "Okay, you can take your baby now." So she touched the baby. Boom, placenta came out. The second birth. So why did that happen? Basically, what happened is that the moment she touched the baby, and the baby secreted oxytocin and bonded, she secreted oxytocin, bonded with the child, but that also actually took the uterus and shrunk it. And those blood vessels that are as thick as your finger, they're like your pinky. Well, if that placenta came off and it was still open, she could have bled to death. That childbirth is a very dangerous thing. I mean, this is recent in the human history that we have got a low risk at childbirth. And that's one of the reasons. So I also didn't know where that placenta is in the uterus. So I didn't dare put the baby on the mother, and this uterus shrinks, and maybe just a piece of it comes off, it tears, she bleeds to death, right? So I didn't know. And I asked, "Were you booked?" And she said, "No, because you booked, you actually know your risks." So long story short, that's why I was a bit cruel, but then, right, everything worked. Those blood vessels go, the uterus goes boom. And the baby and the mother's life are saved. They stay alive. So oxytocin bonding keeps you alive. It doesn't enable you to thrive and give you survival and so forth. It keeps you alive. It's essential it's as like oxygen, breathing. Keeps you alive. And therefore the brain stem, which is I'll show you the brain stem just now, which is the most primitive and basic part of your brain, is all about keeping you alive. It's so beautifully made, eh? Right. Bonding, so oxytocin is called the hormone of trust. So we often say it's actually a wrong term. It should rather be entrustment, because I think entrustment is a better way of understanding what that kind of bonding does. Bonding also, so bonding gives you entrustment. I entrust my life to you, and you entrust your life to me. That's what people do when they get married, right? Or when they have a real band of brothers and team. They entrust themselves to each other. Another very good example of entrustment among men comes from the war zones, right? So think about soldiers in the old days. You had a sword, and you can only cover 180 perimeter. Visual perimeter, that's what you can do. So you need somebody at your back. So two soldiers fought back to back. I've got your back. Eh? If your mate was dead, you were dead. And that's entrustment. So I entrusted my life to my buddy and vice versa. That's entrustment. It's also very biblical, right? It's amazing. You think about the bond with God. I gave you everything, my son, and I require of you just to accept it? No. Accept, yes. You don't have to do anything, but you also have to do something. One thing, give everything. Surrender, give yourself. So once again, the fair transaction there is bonding. I give my everything, you gave everything. Now we are in bonding, in a bond. It's beautiful, it's entrustment. So the essence of life lies in that. Fathers, closer you are to your family, also to a pregnant wife, the more bonding you will have. And your brain will change because of that. And this is where I wanted to get, is the brain changes. How does the brain change, or why? It changes so that you and I are actually at our best prepared to overcome the challenges that is in front of us in that life stage. So the baby now what does the baby now do? What is the baby's biggest challenge? I've got oxygen and I've got bonding, but I don't have food, eh? I need food and I need shelter and so on. Oh, that's the incubator, right? So now I'm incubated with my family, with my mother and with father. So it's incubators, and then of course you incubate. Just want to complete that one. You incubate with your kids, with your family, with your kids, with your school, and so on. And here we are incubated in another group. We incubate in groups. We have social systems of safety. Social safety is incubation. And of course, right through our lives, we need to be incubated. You're even, Macabre, incubated in your death. But we're incubated, we're received into the arms of God. It's an incubation system. Life is not a safe place, but we are kept safe through that incubation. The child now has got the safe incubation, but needs food. Now we're into true Maslow. So how do they do? How do they get food? Well, basically, they make nice little noises and facial expressions, and they recognize the feeder. So their brains now start to develop. The things they actually don't have to develop are the things that already exist, right? That's the DNA, we said, the memory. They can clasp. They've got reflexes. They can do this. You and I all have that reflex. Do you know that? We all have a sucking reflex. It's a reflex. It's something that you and I cannot control. And it is meant to save our lives, to keep us alive. So we can drink from the mother's breast. We lose it when our brains continue to develop as we get older, of course, and when we don't need it anymore, right? So around 1 year or so, you start to actually, it goes away. If you see demented patients, I've seen many patients who are demented, it comes back. You touch them, you just touch them there, and you see their lip goes. You'll see it if you look for it. It's called the snout or the pout reflex, and it's the sucking reflex that effectively is memory that the child knows and you can't afford to learn that. You must have it right from the start. So it's in the DNA. So things come together, right? When we sort of started talking about it. Now, the baby can drink, they can clasp, they can do, but they actually have to build some relationship with this feeder. The feeder must like me. So they start to develop, they actually recognize the feeder's voice and the face of the feeder, and they develop a specific set of emotional skills to ensure that they actually are liked by the mother. Smell. The parts of the brain that opens, that now starts to grow more brain cells, those connections, 10 times more brain cells than what you're going to need, are those areas that are needed for the child's survival. So that the baby is best developed for that life stage threats, to overcome the threats. The threat is I'm not going to get food, for example, right? And so they overcome it by recognizing the face, the voice, and then have the social links with him. And that part of the brain then, as we said, opens up like a window and it grows many more connections, 10 times more connections, and then it actually prunes down 9 out of 10, and then it settles. And so you have windows of areas that open as the child grows and become older, become a teenager, many things open there, and the rest of your life, right through to death. An aging person is the best adapted for aging and for the way that you need to live life as an aged person to pay back with experience and wisdom to the system. But you developed for that. And that is that is adaptation. You see, we actually unconsciously always adapt continuously throughout our lifetimes. And so this wonderful brain continues to grow connections and new connections as we progress through life. This is what we call resilience in action. What's the difference between, has anybody heard of homeostasis? Yes, it's sort of, have you heard of allostasis? Yeah, less of us, yes. What's the difference? So homeostasis is things are balanced. What comes in must go out. It has to. It's like an accounting balance sheet. You gotta end with 0 at the end. So every day you and I take in water and fluids. What goes in must come out. Okay, he can't stay. So basically, we take in the same amount of fluid that we excrete. We sweat it out and we chuck it into the reservoir, and then we bladder it out, and so on. It's all homeostatic. And when I was still studying medicine, that was the big thing. It's still a big thing. But what is the difference between homeostasis and allostasis? Allostasis says the balance that I need to continuously achieve is a balance that gives me then a baseline, relaxed, physiological state. Exactly. I'll speak to that in a second, okay? So a baseline, relaxed, physiological state is what we call the state of equilibrium. It means that you and I are okay. We are well, and we remain well in a rapidly evolving world. That's the challenge. The world is changing at a rapidly accelerated pace. The only thing that is constant about the world's change is acceleration. It goes like this. The amount of, do you know floating point operations? I'll explain that in a second. Floating point operations in a computer is plus, minus, multiply, and divide. That's floating point operations. The amount of these little calculations that the world's best supercomputer could make in 2015 was 33 million per second in 2015. The floating point operations of the largest supercomputer in the world. Do you know what it is today? It was 33 million. Today it's over 1.2 billion. Literally like this. And until then it was like this. And then zip. So the world is changing at the speed of technology, and you and I have archaic brains that cannot actually keep up. we're in trouble. What happens if you cannot actually overcome the challenges in front of you and continuously remain in this state of equilibrium? What do? You are exerting energy. Remember we talked about the yield-energy ratio? You're exerting energy. You're actually pumping in energy to try to find a solution to my problem, but I can't find it. And then unconsciously that happens. Does it happen mostly when you're awake or mostly when you're asleep? When you're asleep. Exactly. Because the sleep is really all about learning the new things and problem solving your complex problems. And if you have problems that you cannot solve because things are just too fast and too thick and too fast, you actually, it sleeps on you. Exactly. Okay, so exactly, that's why we say sleep on it, because you actually solve problems. But if you can't, you are exerting energy all the time. What is that called? Chronic stress. That's chronic stress. So chronic stress is when you continuously exert the energy to overcome a challenge, but you can't. And what happens, like any machine, when this machine continues to run, it burns all the time, day and night. It burns out. Burnout. So why is burnout such a big thing today? It's because the world is changing so fast. We don't have the materials and the machinery to overcome it. We don't have the right mindsets to overcome it. We are trying to do it with in the old archaic way in 2015 and 2010. We're not going to make it now. Burnout has been diagnosed in 34% in a study over 7 different countries across the globe in 2019. 34%. Do you know what it was in 2022? Same group? Well, the same cohort? 70%. Doubled. Burnout has doubled over the last 3 years, since 2019 to 2022. COVID, you say COVID happens, right? Yes. But you also know that Gallup is doing a study every year. They look at the unhappiness factor in the world. The unhappiness factor in the world since 2011 has been constantly, linearly risen. COVID made no difference to that. It's just people are just more and more unhappy. More and more unhappy, and we have a mental pandemic. Depression, anxiety, disconnection. The world has never been as connected as today, yet so disconnected. The world needs a father, because at the core of connection, we need bonding. And I'm not saying it's only because we have a fatherhood crisis. It's part of the problem, undoubtedly part of the problem. It's a multifactorial problem. This is one of the solutions we need to work towards, and the whole system needs to work to different solutions. And I just want to say, absolutely applaud what you're doing, because it's so critical. Suicide has shot through the roof in New York City, and especially amongst the young ones. Who are the most vulnerable when it comes to burnout today? Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers. Gen Z. Gen Z and millennials are way more prone to burnout and mental dysfunction than Gen X and baby boomers. There are multiple reasons for that, we think. It's not only because they are sitting on computers all the day. Come on, man, I'm also sitting on a computer all the day. We use social media. It's part of our lives. But there's more to it. I think one of them is that we have capacity for problem solving in groups and collectives because we are networked well. Sitting here says you are part of a network that looks after you and so on. And the incubation, I think, is a big challenge for Gen Zs. They also have younger brains that more relates to a teenage brain than to an older brain. I'll explain that in a second. But there's a big challenge here. Guys, this is a very big challenge. Burnout, therefore, is a result of chronic stress in the workplace, but elsewhere, chronic stress is a result of not being able to overcome challenges and to move back into that state of equilibrium. So we didn't digress. We talked homeostasis. Allostasis is this ability of a living being like you and me. All our cells have allostasis. It says there's a challenge because I need to get to that desired set point. It's like, where do you want to go? I want to go there. Okay. And we continuously want to go somewhere. I need to go there. Okay, but I'm here. How do I get there? I have to use my knowledge, my skills, my expertise, my experience. You know, those things are very different, and they actually build on each other, right? Knowledge in your 20s, skills in your 30s, it's more or less 30s. Expertise, pattern recognition in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and then experience. I can actually transcend my wisdom through different contextual environments and tell you this is where we need to go. I just want to use quick ad break on that. The brain uses way more energy to give you knowledge. If I only use knowledge to solve a problem, I use way more energy. When I have skills, I have a deeper brain circuit that gives me a much lower energy and a high yield. Very high yield for the energy I assign to task. Arguably, in our life in work today, the highest yield energy ratio is expertise. How did you know that person had this and this? I just know because I know because I know. Because my unconscious brain, unconscious again, actually just recognized the pattern. Okay, but if you have knowledge, you've got to actually know about all the properties of the pattern and then actually use that. And then you have to make deductions. It's a bit more like a computer. Whereas now you've got to make a intelligent pattern recognition. Low energy, high yield. That's also why the world of work, business pays a lot for expertise because it comes at such a low energy expense. It's beautiful how this works, right? Experience is very different, as we said, because that's wisdom that we've lost, arguably, in the world, and we need to rekindle it, especially from fathers who are grandfathers who are suffering in a matriarchal society. I just want to make a big statement and then run away. Society is matriarchal, at least the one that I know. Yes, the West. I think other societies still figured out how to keep the grandfather, the patriarch, close, to make the contributions through their experience and wisdom continuously. But the West is struggling with that. And I think that's one of the reasons men die so young. Not only because they can or want to. They die young because they're not making a meaningful contribution to the group. They don't have social safety anymore when they are old. When you retire, you must become an expert coach. I sat with an Uber driver once a while ago and we said, what do the men need to do in South Africa? And he said, I think they must coach. And I said, yes. We must all become coaches. You must mentor people, mentor the young people. You will have a sense of meaningful contribution and you will live longer because you are needed, you are essential. So fatherhood is not only of young ones, it's of the whole system because the system is matriarchal and patriarchal. But I think we've lost something there. Just want to actually mention that quickly. Then let me run back to the idea of knowledge, skills, expertise, experience. It's phenomenal how we actually develop that and we, over time, have less energy, higher yield, but we use all of that in allostasis to actually get to that point. Because I actually now need to get to the point, to achieve the goal. Then I use that knowledge, skills, expertise, experience to solve the problem. And what is the problem? I'm going to miss the point. I'm not going to arrive at the right place. And then I use that, and then I arrive at the place. Is that correct? It sounds correct, but you know what happens in real life? We miss the point. We miss it all the time. We do this. And then that's actually a mistake. But if it's too far off, it's called dissonant, then we are gone. That's a failure. But most failures that we call failures are just mistakes. We just go, you see, you undershoot, you overshoot. You do it the whole time. That's actually how we do it. And that's allostasis at work. Your whole system does it all the time. You and I solve problems, we do that. We always do that. And every time we miss the point, we think it's a failure if you have a certain mindset, but It's not a failure. This is death. That's just, hey, getting it right. And this is allostasis at work. So allostasis says you use your knowledge, prior knowledge, skills, experience to overcome the challenge, to reach the desired set point, and then you learn through that. You grow. You get better because you build memory. Because it's a living system, it builds memory, it builds DNA, and you become better at this. What is resilience? Knowledge, skills, expertise. We use our knowledge, our skills, our expertise, and our experience to overcome our challenges and to move back into that baseline equilibrium state, to stay there. And through that experience, we learn and grow so we can get better at that. What is psychological resilience? The brain. It makes use of all the mental, emotional, and social capacities to overcome challenges. And it learns to overcome challenges that you don't even think was related to the problem I had because it's so complex. But it's beautiful. It just continuously develops. So can you see that allostasis expresses itself as resilience in the organism? What is business to the brain? Business meaning anything you do? I'll tell you what the Delphi technique tells us what business to the brain is. We use our knowledge, our skills, our expertise, our experience to allocate resources together, to distribute those resources fairly amongst a group so we can stay alive, survive, and thrive in life. Can you see resilience? Knowledge, skills, expertise, experience. Allocate resources is a challenge. That's the problem-solving part. So you use knowledge, skills, expertise, experience to, through innovation and problem-solving, overcome challenges and allocate resources. And then you distribute it fairly so that you can be well. Allostasis expressed as resilience, and resilience in action is basically what the brain does for us in work, in every single thing we do. Which means, if you look at this, in fact, I need to go back here. Look at that, the brain. To the far left, that's the back of the brain, that's the front of the brain. The brain stem, hey, where's my little thing? Thank you, here it is. So that's the spinal cord there, and the extension of the spinal cord there is the brain stem. This is the cerebellum, that's the small brain. And it's actually sort of very much part of the brain stem. If you cut through it, it's just one big structure. But the brain stem then actually goes right into the rest of the brain. And I'm going to open up the brain for you in a second. And that part of that brain stem becoming the rest of the brain stem keeps us alive, and it works from basic to sophisticated to ensure that we actually have resilience in action. This part of the brain here, this colored part of it, of course the brain, it doesn't look like this. It looks more like that. But this is the back part, is the part that we actually see with, the occipital lobe. Do you see with your eyes? No. Say sorry to all your kids. You don't see with your eyes. You see with your brain. You receive light and visual shapes and color and movement through your eyes. That's very beautiful. Of course you see with your eyes, that's okay. But you actually make pictures, the visual pictures in your brain. In the brain, those components are actually assembled and integrated. That's called sensory integration. It's integrated to give you a picture of what's going on, an internal representation of what's out there. Is that camera out there? It's in here. And the same with every one of us. So I'm also not out here, I'm actually in there. Yes, I am out here, but I'm in there. I'm an internal representation. And that also has got profound meaning, and I'll get to that, because it speaks to mindset, right? What you believe about what is important, that's your world. You have a picture of the world internally. So here you've got hearing, there you've got vision, there you've got touch. And if you open the cleft between the yellow and the purple there, you actually find smell and taste in there. So the senses all are integrated here to give you a picture of the physical world. In the same way we build pictures of the emotional world, we build pictures of the spiritual world. Spiritual just speaks to that deep interconnectedness of everything. It doesn't speak to faith, spiritual in this sense. It speaks to deep sense of interconnectedness. All right. So the back of the brain also, interesting enough, holds the knowledge. So your knowledge, your visual knowledge of something, like an apple that is red or green. Think about an apple, the shape. Think about the sound when you bite through it. Think about the sensation when you touch that apple. I think only an apple feels like an apple. You know, it's got that interesting, it's not sticky, but it's also not that smooth. Well, that's easy. It's not that, it's an interesting one. It's an apple sense, the constituency. Waxy. Is it? Waxy. Waxy. Yeah, it's waxy. Waxy. Okay, there are many C's when it comes to an apple. It's apple C. All right. It's an apple. What part of your brain think about the way it feels, that part? It's the knowledge of an apple is there, that the sensation. The sound when you bite an apple is stored there, your knowledge of what it sounds like. The vision of what it looks like is there. So everywhere here you've got so-called long-term memory sites that gives you knowledge of properties. See? And so if you need to solve a problem, you need this knowledge of those properties. I'm going to tell you a little story quickly to actually, once again, just reinforce that and to speak about reflexes, which is quite interesting. But if you open the brain there, and I'm going to show you again just now, is this part of the brain then uses that knowledge to solve a problem with. That's your most sophisticated, complex problem-solving part, the prefrontal cortex. So can you see that you learn, this is learning and this is knowledge, and all your skills go deep down and the expertise, and then you've got the problem-solving machine here. Can you see that the whole brain, if you look at it from the back to the front, is resilience in action? What do we do when we sleep? We learn and we solve problems. Resilience in action. It's quite amazing. So resilience in action when you sleep, resilience in action if you look at the brain, resilience in action when you think about the world of work, whatever we do, that is what drives complex adaptation. If you have low resilience, you are going to develop chronic stress and burnout over time, once you can't take it anymore. So resilience is critical. Is it static? It is dynamic. Some of us have higher resilience innately than others, so we need to plug in quite deeply. We all need to plug in. But you can actually enhance your resilience by doing the right things, by secreting those, remember the cereal, the growth factors, grow the brain in the right areas, where the learning part and the problem-solving part. We'll get to that just now. You can grow new brain cells and you can enhance your resilience capacity significantly as an individual. And we'll talk about what the things are that you need to do. One of them is what Ben just did with us, moving us into that baseline relaxed physiological state, mindfulness, silencing that mind. If you do that every day for 15 days, and it's not reading the Bible or praying, right? It's the silence before that or during that. That's the importance. Wees stil en weet in Afrikaans. Be still and know. That's silence and the deep breathing. That's one of the things that actually grow brain cells in the learning brain and in the problem-solving brain. And it enhances your capacity for problem solving. And it reduces your risk for chronic stress and for burnout. But that's just a small piece of building resilience when it comes to collective resilience. We need collective resilience to stay on the change, that rapidly accelerated curve, right? And that actually requires this understanding of the living system. That's why we started off with this idea of high yield, low energy. We are organs of another organism called the team, the family. As a father, I have the responsibility of this team called the family, a living being, to ensure that it's a living, breathing entity where bonding has actually ensured that we have got that capacity for a very high yield. Because if you don't have a high yield, you're not going to stay in this rapidly accelerated curve, right? So that's also why the human consciousness are talking resilience so much. Collective resilience, interconnectedness are important, hashtags, me too, all of those things, if you actually go and break it down. It's all about equality and equity that needs to be distributed fairly amongst the whole group, the whole world, so that we can deeply interconnect and have collective resilience. It's quite fascinating. But that should not nullify or mitigate the importance of the family unit and the responsibility of the family unit that actually eventually gives us healthy societies. So the whole thing gives you collective resilience that's much, much higher than my own individual capacity. Even my highest resilience is not enough. But if we all have high individual resilience and collective, we actually will overcome the challenges that we have created for ourselves. And we're not going to stop doing that. So the whole thing does that. So the humanizing factor is critical together with technology. I have a whole brain still to show you after a break. So I'm going to stop here because I think it's a good place to stop, right? Because and in fact, I'm going to put something up here that you can maybe just screen. I talked through all of this. If you want to come closer, maybe you can probably just scan the QR code. Maybe you can do it from where you're sitting. Am I in the way? This will just take you to a free assessment that you can do. It takes you to Neuroscience free. You can just do a free assessment for 3 minutes. Not now, but unless you want to do it now, but you can do it tonight, any time. You can see, and it will actually give you an indication of your psychological resilience. It's for an individual. And it will open up a dashboard for you as well. You're going to have to create an account, and then it will, fantastic, yes. So you'll see there, just create an account, and maybe it takes, all in all, takes 5 minutes to do it as well.
One thing I'm for sure that will happen, Egyptians will do it in break time. 100%. Am I right? Yeah. Am I right? For sure. They're always the first to jump, okay?
If I told you I got it from Egypt, you wouldn't be surprised either, right?
I'm never wrong when I guess that, with Egyptians. Friends, I don't, if anyone fell asleep now, there's something critically wrong with you. Is that right? These things are super, super essential for what we're doing. And I hope that every single sentence that he says, or every concept that he shares, that you relate it to what we train, to what we're supposed to train, to what fathers are supposed to be, to what fathers and mothers together, what families are supposed to be, so that they can create that society, that broader community. So my brain is running like 1,000 miles. I want to look at this video again for at least 20 times. Is that right? Because almost every sentence has something related that I want to think more about and spend more time with. So thank you, Etienne. Up to this point, super, super valuable for us. And please, don't let it hang there in the air. You got to think it practically down to the home level. Down to the home level, down to the home level. And it should not be too difficult to relate that back down to the home level. Is that right? Okay, phenomenal. Get your cup of tea. Don't do it too long, because then we lose some time here on this end. Is that okay? Get your cup of tea, and leave him alone for a while so that he can drink coffee or tea first. Is that okay? And then after that, you come back, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A.